People who believe aging brings wisdom live longer. This is a quote from today's guest in his most recent book, The Expectation Effect. And I've got to say, for our listeners who have listened to the podcast for quite some time, you know I read a lot. And this book shot very quickly into my top 10 and is probably making it into my top 5 all time. I absolutely love this book, and I am more than excited to introduce our guest to you today. We're going to talk about this concept of the expectation effect, how your brain is a prediction machine, and what that means to you and your overall growth, evolution, and progression in life. That's today on this episode of the Evolve Podcast.
Welcome to the Evolve Podcast. Evolve your body, evolve your mind, evolve your soul, and evolve your tribe. And now it's time to disrupt.
Welcome back to the Evolve Podcast, where evolved men and women come to disrupt, connect, and get inspired. Before we start, I want to thank our sponsor, MedOne Capital, for sponsoring the Evolve Podcast. We appreciate the support. The MedOne Group exists for the sole purpose of making medical equipment available to the healthcare industry. You can find out more at medonegroup.com. As always, joining me from the Mind Palace in Oberlin, Ohio, and we were a little sketchy on whether or not you were going to be joining us today, Miles. The most interesting man that I know is W. Miles Riley. Welcome.
Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we had one hell of a night last night.
Quite the storm, knocking out
Yeah.
trees, power lines, and yet here you are.
I have never seen anything that like that. The 65 years on the planet, I have never seen lightning like that. I have never
Wow.
seen torrential rain like that. The power went out and it was absolutely stunning. I'm glad nobody was hurt, but it was stunning to look at. I just stood at my window, just watching the earth light up.
Beautiful. It's amazing what nature can do. It's gorgeous and terrifying all at the same time. And you with your new bionic hip, I'm sure you went out there and picked up some trees and just threw them around, right?
Threw them around just like that. Clear the
Good
path
man.
for some people.
I love it. And somewhere in the mountains of Utah, I am Steve Cutler. Today's guest is David Robson. David Robson is an award-winning science writer specializing in the extremes of the human brain, body, and behavior. After graduating with a degree in mathematics from Cambridge University, he worked as a feature editor in New Scientist for 5 years before moving to BBC Future, where he was a senior journalist for 5 years. His writing has also appeared in The Guardian, The Atlantic, Aeon, Men's Health, and many more outlets. In 2021, David received awards from the Association of British Science Writers and the UK Medical Journalists Association for his writing on misinformation and the risk of communication during the COVID pandemic. In 2022, he won a Mental Health Story of the Year at the MJA Annual Awards and was a finalist for the Best British Science Journalist of the Year award from ABSW. David's first book, The Intelligence Trap, was published in 2019 and received worldwide media attention. His second book, The Expectation Effect, How Your Mindset Can Transform Your Life, was published in the UK on the 6th of January in 2022 and in the USA and Canada on the 15th of February in 2022. It is a journey through the cutting-edge science of how how mindset shapes every facet of our lives, revealing how your brain holds the key to unlocking a better you. The Expectation Effect was a BBC Radio 4 Book of the Week and won a British I am messing this one up, David. I apologize. Psychological Society Book Award. That's a mouthful in the popular science category. You can find the book on Amazon, or if you're like me, you can buy the book and concurrently listen to it on Audible because you love it so much and you want to get so much out of it. David Robson, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's completely my pleasure.
We are grateful to have you, and you are coming to us from London today. Is that right?
I am, yeah.
And we hope you meet our expectations.
I I'm not even sure what your expectation of us is. I hope it's well, and I hope we meet those expectations. But I'm confident that our listeners, regardless of what their expectations are, their expectations will be met or exceeded. Miles mentioned his weather there, and I know before we started the recording, you said that the weather hasn't been kind to you in London this summertime.
No, it's quite grim. It's very cloudy even now. It felt like we went from spring to autumn without having much summer, to be honest. So
Isn't that disappointing?
it is.
We had in Utah, we had the longest winter that I've ever experienced. And by the time summertime came, we jumped from winter right into summer. We went from the crazy, crazy, ridiculous cold into the crazy, ridiculous heat. And now I think we're getting a little bit of fall. So nice to see those things change. But expectation really sets us up for either happiness or sadness. But first of all, I want to, for our listeners who have not read the book or don't know about it, can you explain what is the expectation effect?
Yeah, so my definition of the expectation effect is this phenomenon where our beliefs can create self-fulfilling prophecies, and that can happen through very interconnected mechanisms, which can be changes to your behavior, changes to your perception, or changes to your physiology. And I say that are interconnected because often a change to your physiology will then change your behavior. A change to your perception might change your behavior too. The most common and famous example of this is the placebo effect in medicine, which I guess we might talk about later. But actually what is new and exciting about all of this cutting edge scientific research is that we found that you have very similar phenomena, things that are, kind of akin to the placebo effect in all other areas of life. So that can affect your fitness, how you respond to a new diet, how you respond to sleep loss, your productivity at work, even how you age. So it's very widespread. It really is just part and parcel of the way humans operate.
And so it really isn't just that if I believe something that I am going to will that thing towards me, right? And one of the things I love about your book is that it is so different in the sense that it's based in science, it is backed by research. This isn't if I sit and meditate, I'm just going to bring millions of dollars into my lap immediately type of book. And so the changes, whether it's in the physiology, the changes to the behavior, these are the things that start to create the life that we are wanting. Can you talk a little bit more about how some of these shifts create the life that we're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the real kind of basis of this whole idea is that the brain is working as this prediction machine. And what we mean by that, and it's very fashionable theory now in neuroscience, what we mean by that is that it's constantly building simulations of the world around it based on its past experiences, its context, your culture. And those simulations, first of all, they're shaping your sensory perception. So we know that the data hitting your eyes or your ears or your taste buds is often imperfect, it's ambiguous. And what these simulations are doing is tidying up that messy data and making sense of it, filling in the blind spots, sometimes discounting extraneous data that would be irrelevant to your goals. And so that is then shaping your perception. But simultaneously, the brain is also then using these simulations to guide your physiology. It's preparing the body for the challenges that it believes you're going to face in the near future and in the distant future. And that in turn is also going to shape your behavior, whether you go into the fight or flight response, whether you're primed more for creativity and problem solving. All of these things can be influenced by those simulations.
There's so much power to that, especially when we talk about the physiology of it. I remember when I was young and running track, I had the same physiological response before every meet, and especially before the gun would go off. And I remember as a 100-meter runner, I would get into the blocks, I would feel my stomach feel like it was just going to drop out from underneath me. I would feel the rush of adrenaline coming to me when the person holding the gun yelled "set" and everybody's hips went up in the air. anxiety could not have been more palpable. In fact, I can almost taste it in the back of my mouth right now, what it felt like. And it was a pure physiological response. Now, as soon as the gun went off, all of that went away and my focus became narrow and I just ran. Preparation for activity is something that the brain does when it expects certain activities. You referenced this before, that our physiology preps us, this fight or flight response. How does this insight help people to question their current beliefs?
Well, so I think like anxiety is a great example of the expectation effect. And essentially, like you said, your brain is already preparing your body for action when we're
Right.
getting anxious. That's what's happening. So that, in a sense, is kind of one broad expectation effect. But then what the research shows us is that actually our expectations of the ways that anxiety is going to influence our performance is also very important. And so, it could be that you were kind of getting kind of prepared for that race. And you read that anxiety not as something that was going to enhance your performance, but you saw that it is something that was kind of debilitating. It was almost a sign of your impending failure. And I think that's much more common, maybe not in sports, but definitely in something like public speaking or when you're facing an exam. You start to have those same fluttering feelings in your stomach, your heart's racing, your palms are sweaty, and you believe that because you're feeling so nervous, that's going to lead you to perform worse, that you can't focus, that you can't come up with those solutions that you need to. Now, that is one expectation. Another equally reasonable expectation would be much more similar to your expectations on the racetrack, where you see that the anxiety is actually going to fuel your performance.
Right.
That can be equally true in the exam hall because your heart is pumping all of this oxygenated blood to your brain that's going to fuel your thinking. And that kind of charged feeling in your muscles comes from cortisol, which is also making sure that you're kind of alert. Like there's no good going into the exam hall or onto a stage feeling kind of drowsy and sleepy, like you're going to perform a lot worse that way. So we can see stress, the same physiological responses to stress, broadly the same. We can see them as either debilitating or energizing and enhancing. And what the research shows is that it's those expectations that then become the self-fulfilling prophecy. So people who see their stress as being more enhancing and energizing, they actually do perform better in all of these different tasks. They're using their stress to their advantage.
Yeah, it really is about the perspective. I love how you
Right.
talked about that, and I love how you referenced that in the book. Years ago, so we have 3 kids, and years ago, somebody gave me a GoPro camera, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. They had just come on the market, and I thought, oh, this is great. And then I realized, well, I'm just not that type of guy that films himself when he's out. Like I've never been wired that way. But then as I'm going through the package and I notice that there's this little thing that you can put on the head and you can carry it around and you can video yourself while you're doing it. I said, it wouldn't be interesting for me to video myself or what I'm doing, but I would love to see what life is like through my kids' perspective. And so my wife and I took the 3 kids out and we went on a hike. And I had it on my oldest, my second, and then my youngest. And going back and watching their perspectives from that hike was fascinating to me. We all did the same hike. We went up the same mountain. We saw, and I say saw in air quotes because we didn't see the same things, but we all saw the same things. We experienced the same environment. And yet, watching my son and his interaction and the way that he would run around and pick up a rock and throw it versus the way that my oldest would just very calmly walk and pause and observe, such as her personality, really opened me up to that people can be in the same space. They could be experiencing, even as you said, the same physiological response, but their perception of it is completely different. How can people harness the power of the expectation effect and guide the physiology in the direction that achieves their goal or that helps them move towards a more positive outcome?
I mean, when I started writing the book, that was really like the $1,000,000 question was, could we change our mindsets? And the research really shows quite strongly that you can. And it's not something that you just kind of flick a switch and then your mindset is changed forever. Like, it does need perseverance, like you would expect for any skill that you're learning. But the fact is, we can change it. And what the research found was that actually just learning about the science of the expectation effect is often enough to get that process started. So with these students who go into that exam expecting that their anxiety is going to be this kind of depleting, diminishing force that's going to damage the results, they actually just included in like the mock exam booklet a short passage of text that explained that stress is adaptive and that we evolved it to enhance our performance and to actually reappraise those symptoms as something that was like a tool that they could use. And what they found was that alone was enough to change their performance in that exam. They did perform remarkably better, and
Wow.
crucially, it then changed some of the parameters of their physiological response. So even though they were experiencing the stress response, it seemed to be a less extreme, kind of more moderate, healthier stress response. So in addition to kind of the fluctuations in cortisol, they also saw the release of anabolic hormones, like testosterone, that can actually help to kind of protect the body during a physical challenge. And afterwards, they saw that their kind of cardiovascular response kind of relaxed a lot more quickly, which is really important for your long-term health. If each time you face a new stress, you can recover very quickly afterwards, it stops you accumulating the damage that might come from being repeatedly stressed when you find recovery very difficult. So yeah, learning about reframing their emotions was enough to bring about that immediate improvement. And then I think what the research shows us is that actually we just have to remember to keep on doing this. So to actually build on that. So the next time you enter a similarly stressful situation, to kind of try to remember how you had reframed it in the past and the success you'd experienced that time, to kind of really go on that trajectory. I did this with my own public speaking. I used to hate public speaking like most people. But when I was promoting the expectation effect, like, I really tried to practice what I preach. So I would do that reframing every time I went on stage. And, it didn't perform miracles immediately, but it did turn my stress over the year and a half that I've been promoting the book. It turned my stress and my kind of fear of public speaking completely around, so that now I really love promoting my book and I love the conversations that I have, and it lets me appreciate that, and it's just allowed me to grow so much by just changing the way I appraise the stress response.
It's amazing. I've been in the health and fitness field for almost 25 years, and one of the things that I've learned in working with top athletes, professional athletes, Olympic athletes, people who've performed and won at a very high degree, the response that they have from a physiological standpoint might be very similar to. In fact, I used to work with the group that would do testing on some of the top Olympic athletes. And while the responses were very, very similar from blood work, from a hormonal profile, the nuances in response were fascinating. The top athletes, as you referenced before, tended to have more of the hormonal response, like testosterone. Cortisol levels were more manageable. And it was almost like they had learned how, through setting better expectations and understanding through their methodology, through their system, that whatever was happening physiologically, it was setting them up for performance. It was getting them into a state where they could perform better. So it takes time, as you said. It's not something that happens over time, because I love how you talk about in the book that the body or the brain is a prediction machine. Machines don't just change with time; they change with tweaking and nuancing. Can you explain to our readers what you mean when you say that the brain is a prediction machine?
Yeah, so it really is this idea that it's building these detailed simulations of the world around it. And so that could include, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what's going on in your own body, because we talk of five senses, but actually we have many more senses. We have senses within the gut that help us to work out how much food we've consumed, what nutrients are there, whether we need to look for more food in the future based on what we've just eaten. And all of this is being influenced and interpreted by the brain working as this prediction machine. It's using its simulations to kind of hone that data, to interpret that data, and to then guide your physiology and your perception and your behavior. So that's really the idea. There's this idea in neuroscience that actually the formation of these predictions, those simulations, that's actually also fundamental to the conscious experience. So it's really, almost what we're perceiving is that simulation rather than directly experiencing the world around us. So people often talk about consciousness as this kind of controlled hallucination. I love that theory, but I think for the purposes of the expectation effect, we don't really have to think so much about consciousness per se, but we are thinking about what these simulations are, how they're shaping those three main factors: behavior, perception, and physiology, and how our own thinking processes are feeding into those simulations. Because unlike other animals who also work through this prediction machine, we have culture, we have language, we have symbols. All of these things can shape the simulations that we're building.
David, fascinating point. Charlie Munger, who's the co-chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, has said that he believes in becoming a polymath in life and learning many things about many different areas and becoming an expert in as many things as you can. And one of the reasons why he poses this as an important concept is that the more you learn about the world, the better frame of reference you have for all things. In fact, Warren Buffett, his partner in crime at Berkshire, has said that Charlie makes amazing decisions, partially because of how much he knows and how much he reads. How is educating ourselves and gathering more information about the world influencing our overall expectations?
Yeah, I mean, it is influencing them enormously. So, a baby, one of the reasons that babies like they're so helpless is because they haven't built enough experiences to really guide the prediction machine. So maybe they are experiencing the world in its kind of raw form a little bit more than an adult
Great description.
would
I love that.
be. Right.
Raw form.
And, I think like when you see a baby that's in distress and it doesn't know why it's in distress because it can't interpret, the feelings inside its body when it's getting hungry or when it needs the toilet or when its, gut is aching a little bit, it has no way of interpreting them. Whereas as we get older, we're much more capable of kind of appraising the sensations we're feeling. Now, one of the things that we can do even as adults is to educate ourselves about the many different emotions that we can experience. I think like we've been brought up to look at our emotions in quite a crude way, maybe. You have the basic emotions, as Darwin would call them, as, anger, sadness, happiness, all